Hi, my name is Kennett, and I will be performing the story of the Man in the Moon. The man in the moon came tumbling down and inquired the way to Norwich. He went to the south and burned his mouth with eating cold peas porridge. Oh, you've never heard the story of the Man in the Moon? Well, sit down, for it is an amusing story, and there's not a single word of truth in it. Now, the man in the moon was quite lonesome, and often he would peek over the edge of the moon and look at the earth below. He envied the people, for he wished he had a companion that he could talk to, instead of having that big planet by himself, with only his whistle to keep him company. One day, while he was peeking over the edge, he saw an alderman sailing through the air towards him. And when the alderman got close, the man in the moon called out to him, "Is it pleasant down on earth?" "Why, yes, it's pleasant. I love the earth, and I would not leave it unless I was obligated to do so." "Do you have any suggestions for pleasant places to visit on the earth?" "Why, yes. I suggest you go to Norwich. They have the world-famous peas porridge, the best porridge you'll ever have." And the alderman sailed off and left the man alone with his thoughts. Now the man in the moon was even more anxious than ever to visit the earth, and he walked home thoughtfully, and he put a few ice cubes on the stove to warm up. Because, well, you see, everything was contrary on the moon. If the man in the moon wanted to warm up, he would knock off a few blocks of ice and put it on the stove. If he wanted to cool down his drinking water, he would put hot coals from the fire in his pitcher. If he got hot, he would put on an overcoat to cool down. And if he got chilly, he would take off his hat and his coat, and sometimes even his shoes. And the man in the moon sat in his home and he thought, "I am going to visit the earth." And he decided that the only way to get down there was to slide down a moonbeam. So the next morning, he got up and he left his house and he locked the door, put the key in his pocket because he wasn't sure how long he was going to be gone. And he went to the edge of the moon and he peeked over, looking for the best moonbeam to slide down. Finally, he found a stable moonbeam that slid down to a very pleasant looking place. So he swung himself over the edge of the moon and grabbed the moonbeam with both of his arms, and he began to slide down. But he found it was a little bit more slippery than he imagined, and he began to slide faster and faster, and eventually, as he was getting closer to the earth, he lost his grip and he tumbled head over heels and he fell plump into a river. And thankfully he was close to the bank so he could crawl out, and he almost got blistered by the cool water. But the sun was rising and the hot rays cooled him off. And as he was cooling off, he began to curiously look around at this new, strange environment. And there was a farmer coming down the road with horses hauling a load of hay. And the horses looked so odd to the man in the moon, for he had only seen them up on the moon, and they frightened him because on the moon they were much, much smaller. But he finally plucked up the courage to talk to the farmer. "Which way is the way to Norwich?" "Norwich? I don't know exactly where it is, but it's some way south." "Thank you." And so the man in the moon began, stop. I should not call him the man in the moon any longer, for he's out of the moon now. I'll refer to him as the man, and you'll know by which man that I'm referring to. Now the man in the moon, the man, see, I almost forgot what I just said. The man began his journey, walking briskly towards the south. And after a long, tiresome journey, he finally reached the village. And at this point, he was very hungry. And he knocked on one of the first doors that he came to. A very good-looking woman answered his knock. "Is this the village of Norwich?" "Why, yes it is. I have come to try a bowl of peas porridge. I hear it's the best porridge in the world." "Oh, well, it surely is. You are in the right place. Please come in and have a seat, and I will fetch you a bowl from my batch that I just made." So the man in the moon thanked the woman and entered. The woman turned around. "Would you like your porridge hot or cold?" "Oh, cold, most definitely. I detest eating anything hot." So the woman got him a big bowl of cold peas porridge, and the man was so hungry that he just took a big spoonful and he let out a great yell and started dancing frantically around the room. For while the bowl of peas porridge may have been cold to earth folk, it was hot to the man in the moon. So hot that it burned his mouth to blisters. "What's the matter?" "What matter? That porridge is so hot it burned my mouth." "Nonsense. That bowl is cold." "Well, then try it for yourself." So the woman tried the porridge and found it cold and pleasant. Now the man was in awe of the woman just eating this porridge that burned his mouth to blisters, and he was so frightened he ran out the door, down the street, as fast as he could. And the policeman, standing on the corner, saw him running, promptly arrested him, and marched him off to the magistrate for trial. "What's your name?" "I don't have a name, sir." Which makes sense, seeing as he was the only man in the moon. It isn't necessary for him to have a name. Come, no nonsense. What is your name? Who are you?" "Well, I am the man in the moon." "No, there is no man in the moon. You may be a man, but you're not in the moon. You're in Norwich." "That is true. Every person is called something. What will you be called?" Well, since I'm not the man in the moon, I'm the man out of the moon. So I'll be called that." Fine. And where are you from?" "The moon?" "Uh-huh, sure. And how did you get here?" "I slid down a moonbeam." Naturally. Now, why were you running?" "Well, a woman fed me a bowl of cold peas porridge and it blistered my mouth." "This man is clearly insane. Take him to the asylum and lock him up." Now, this may have been the man in the moon's fate if there had not been an old astronomer present. That astronomer had studied the moon and the man in the moon. He knew that what was hot on Earth was cold on the moon, and what was hot on the moon was cold on Earth. So he began to believe the man, and he begged the magistrate for just a few minutes so he could fetch his telescope and look to see if the man in the moon was there. And seeing as it was night, he fetched his telescope and he looked up to the moon, and there was no man there. "He seems to be telling the truth, sir." I still don't believe it. Please, sir, open your mouth so we can see the blisters. So the man opened his mouth, and everyone could plainly see that there was blisters all inside his mouth. So the magistrate begged for his forgiveness and asked him what he would like to do next. Well, I'd like to go back to the moon. And how do you suggest we do that? Well, there is a balloon in town, left by the circus that traveled here last summer. We could inflate the balloon and send the man in the moon on his way. Good idea. So the balloon was brought and inflated, and the man in the moon stepped into the basket, and he told the magistrate that he was ready to go. And so off he went into the direction of the moon. And the folks of Norwich stood around with their heads leaned back, looking at as the balloon went higher and higher and higher. And as the man in the moon approached his home, he reached out and grabbed the edge of the moon. And behold, he was the man in the moon again. And after this adventure, he was very content to stay home. But I have no doubt, if you look through a telescope at the moon today, you will see him. Thank you.